control. So in terms of coordination and control, we're talking about the human body, the different um, the individual in terms of the human body, allowing coordination and control to take place properly. Then definitely the nervous system will be one such system that will allow it to be coordinated properly, and also another system that is known as the endocrine system. So those are the two systems that are mainly responsible for coordination and control. So we are actually focusing on the nervous system now, and as you can see from the first pointer, control and coordinate the body parts. That's the main function of the nervous system. Then definitely we would have moved on to what is known as the divisions of the nervous system. And as for the divisions of the nervous system, it is just the entire nervous system being put into different major parts. So one of the most important division is the central nervous system, abbreviation CNS. So why I would say that it is one of the most important part is that simply because this is the part of your nervous system that have to do with controlling, that have to do with making decision. So the second pointer is referring to it as the control center of the human body. So in terms of the human body interacting with different things, different objects, whether inside of the body or outside of the body, it is the central nervous system that actually decide in terms of how that particular body part going to respond to the different things that are in the environment. And remember that in terms of use, instead of using the term different things, I would have mentioned to you a term that is known as stimulus. And definitely stimulus is anything in our environment that normally cause us to react to it. So stimulus would be the singular, while stimuli would be the plural. Moving down to another important division of the nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, definitely made up of the cranial and spinal nerve, and would have said that it take messages or information to and from the central nervous system. And the other division is known as the ANS, or the autonomic nervous system, as its main function or main role is to basically regulate or basically see over the functions of internal body organs or internal body parts. And they would have give you some examples, such as the human heart, and they said that also aspect of the, which would definitely include like the stomach and the intestine. So the divisions of the nervous system specific are their individual functions or roles. Then of course would have looked at different components or different parts that make up the brain. Those notes they are straightforward as for the brain. Just want to point out again that whenever you're answering question that is related to the nervous system, and if you have to write the term medulla, ensure that you have oblongata attached to it, because I would have mentioned that in the kidney or in your kidneys there's another part that is known as the medulla. So as for the nervous system or the human brain, it is the medulla, neurons and nerves. So in terms of the spelling for neuron, some textbook will not spell it with a e at the end there, so it will just spell Neuron. So please be mindful of the variation in terms of those spelling. So they are saying that nerves is basically in this basically this section appear as white threads. These threads consist of bundles of fiber bound together in one sheath. So what we call a nerve, just like how you would imagine an electrical wire or electrical cable, that will definitely have more than one smaller wires in the middle there, being wrapped around and twined around each other. That what image, so you can see what exactly we are talking about. So on the screen is an example of what is known as a nerve. So as you can see, some smaller blue particles in the middle there. Now those would represent the neurons, and just bring it up back on the screen. Inside the fibers are long processes from the cell bodies of nerve cell. A whole nerve cell is called a neuron. So the entire nerve cell is what they would refer to as a neuron. Now, just like I would have been looking at the parts of the human brain, definitely what we'll be doing now is that we'll be looking at the parts of the neuron itself. So that's what we'll be looking at now. So in terms of parts of the neuron, the parts are a neuron looks like. That's what you're seeing to the right there. And at the common parts are the parts that make up a particular section. So the entire middle section there is known as the axon. So the entire middle section we see in terms of color is actually, it have a yellowish appearance. All of that is known as the axon. And in terms of its function, the note is saying that it basically carries electrical impulses away from the cell body. And looking at the image again, to the top section to the left, that's where the cell body is. So in terms of electrical impulses, what we mean by electrical impulses is basically the message or the information that that neuron is carrying. So we could have just exchanged electrical impulses for the word messages or information. So instead of saying electrical impulses, could have also say information or messages. So if you are being asked to give the, and looking at the diagram to the extreme top, slightly to the right, its function or their function carries impulses towards body. Moving down, we have a next section that is known as the myelin sheath, and the myelin sheath is in the center. So the exact yellow part that you are seeing in the middle there, that part is the axon. So the middle section is the axon, while the myelin sheath basically surround or cover or protect the axon there. So they are saying that the myelin sheath surrounds axon, and another part that is known as the dendrons. So in terms of you recalling all of these terms, definitely it is a must that you actually know how to label it. So it is a must. There is no question about it. It is the must that you actually know to label, because that's the only way you will be able to recall. Alright, moving on to another component. So we have an next part that is known as the cell body. I would have mentioned the cell body a while ago in terms of the notes for it. It has a spherical shape, and as you can see, it actually have that spherical shape. So you would not say that that shape is a circular or a round shape. It have a shape that is known as a spherical shape. It contains a very important part of the neuron that is known as the nucleus. And from your knowledge of the characteristics of living things, and also those notes that I would have given you on plant cell and animal cell, by now you should be aware of the fact that the nucleus of any cell is referred to as a brain in terms of processing information and making decision. Yes, I'm seeing that somebody have their hand up. Yeah, somebody have their hand up, but I don't know why. Alright, so moving on to the types of neurons. So we have three types of neurons. We have the sensory neurons, we have the relay neurons, and we have another one that is known as the motor neuron. So those are the three types of neurons. So as for the sensory neuron, of course, take electrical impulses from the sense organ to the central nervous system. So in terms of you touching touching an object, for example, you touching that object, it is actually the sensory neuron that will carry the information from that sense organ. I'm just gonna write. So looking at the screen now, as you can see, the fingertip is touching that hot object, which is definitely a flame. So inside the tip of that finger is some things that are known as sensory receptors. So the sensory receptors are what basically get the information or detect the information, detect and realize that there is an increase of temperature, meaning that the skin is touching something hot. Now after the sensory receptor receive the information or detect that problem, the information now need to go to the central nervous system for processing and analyzing to take place. So in order for this information to reach your central nervous system, then you're gonna need some form of neuron to actually carry that information, and that's where the sensory neuron come into play. So that is why they are saying that the sensory neuron, its function is to actually carry information to the central nervous system, and that information of course would have been coming from a sense organ, and definitely the skin is one such sense organ. Moving down to the relay neuron. So the relay neuron is normally found in the central nervous system. They transfer information between sensory and motor neuron, and the relay neuron also process some amount of information. So the relay neuron kind of in the middle between the motor and the sensory neuron. And as for the motor neuron now, the motor neuron definitely, yes, I'm seeing your hand up. Devisha. Alright, so again, as for the motor neuron, the motor neuron collect information from the central nervous system and take it to the different body parts when responding to this stimulus, which would be the increase in terms of temperature. After they carry the information to the brain or to the central nervous system for processing and decision making. Now that decision that the central nervous system would have made. So the motor neuron is what will carry the information from the central nervous system to those muscles, to the muscles of the arm, so that those muscles can contract and allow movement to actually take place. So just like the divisions, just like the three divisions of the nervous system, which you need to look at the notes and know the difference between those three different divisions. The same thing goes for the three types of neurons. So first you should or you must to know give the difference between all these three neurons in terms of their functions. You should be able to identify them and tell their individual functions, what they are basically responsible for. All right, synapses. This is tip of your finger, and those sensory neurons go all the way up to your brain. It is, I must make it clear that it is not a situation where there's only one sensory neuron that run from your fingertip and go to your brain. No, we actually have thousands of neurons lining out behind each other. So thousands of sensory neurons lining out behind each other, just like how you would see a train with the different cards or the different linkage attached to each other. That's the same thing with the sensory neuron. We have sensory neurons just lining out behind each other. It is just that these sends from your fingertip and go up to your brain. It is not that they are literally joined together, but yes, they actually line up behind. Now, the fact that that small gap exists simply means that there is a name that is attached to that gap, and that is what it is known as the synapses. So the synapses is normally the gap that is basically found at the ends, or you can say between any two neurons. So looking at the screen, the image that you're looking at, the blue part of the image is representing the end of one neuron, and the green part is representing the beginning or the start of another neuron. So basically the diagram is actually showing you what the synapses look like, and remember that the synapses, it is just a space that is created between any two neurons. So in terms of information leaving one neuron and going over to the another, it is not like a situation where it will actually jump from the end of one neuron and go and attach or go to the end of the other neuron directly like that. No. Within the gap, that space that is called a synapsis, there is actually a fluid, and that fluid is known as neurotransmitter. So what happened in terms of information leaving one neuron to another is that, let's say for example, we are using this image where the blue, as I said, will represent the end of a neuron, and the green represent the beginning of another neuron. So let's say for example, the blue one is where the information is at now, and that information need to go in the direction of the green one. The information not just gonna move from the blue one to the green one like that. No, the information will actually move from the blue one, which will then, after moving from the blue one, it now gonna go into that fluid or that chemical that is known as the neurotransmitter, and then the information move from the neurotransmitter and go into the other neuron. So the information don't move, just don't jump from one neuron to another. The information first will leave the neuron that have the information presently and deposit the information or the electrical impulses into the neurotransmitter, and then the neurotransmitter will now send the information to the other neuron. So that's the importance of the synapses. It is just a space that is